Climate change. Are we heading towards a global disaster? From unprecedented wildfires to devastating floods, the year 2024 has been marked by an alarming rise in climate disasters. And yet, the world faces these mounting challenges. Our collective response has remained frustratingly slow. The United Nations has been sounding alarm for years, but the questions remain: are we truly listening, and do we give a shit? In the past year alone, the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events have soared. And I've seen this personally. We've witnessed historic droughts, flash floods, and powerful storms ripping through both developing and developed nations. Wildfires, in particular, have reached unprecedented levels, threatening entire communities and ecosystems. Now, scientists say it's a direct consequence of climate change caused by burning of fossil fuels and deforestation. Unfortunately, the numbers don't lie. In 2024, the world experienced more climate induced disasters than any previous year. The United Nations Global Assessment Report paints a worrying picture. We are currently in a path towards greater catastrophes if swift action isn't taken. But despite these dire warnings, global efforts remain inadequate. Governments, businesses, and individuals are still not acting quickly enough to mitigate the worsening impacts of climate change. Now, the harsh reality is that whilst climate change affects every nation, the burden falls disproportionately on the world's poorest people. Developing nations, particularly small island developing nations, are on the front line. These regions contribute the least to global emissions, yet face the most devastating impact from rising sea levels and food insecurity.
We are sinking, but so is everyone else.
In the words of a recent UN report, the situation is robbing these nations of years of development. Small island nations have repeatedly called for more robust global action, but the response from developed countries, those historically responsible for the bulk of the emissions, remain insufficient. While many developed nations have pledged to reduce their carbon footprints, their progress is increasingly slow. Climate finance promised to help these developing nations adopt to climate impacts often fall short of expectations, leaving vulnerable communities with little support. Meanwhile, however, across the world, frustration is building. Citizens, especially young people, are taking the streets, demanding urgent action from their governments, their elected leaders.
How dare you continue to look away?
They know the clock is ticking. Every year of inaction only brings us closer to a tipping point, a world where extreme weather is the norm. Food and water shortages are widespread, and communities are perpetually displaced. Yet, despite the clear science and the growing outcry, progress on the international stage remains painstakingly slow. The upcoming climate conference in Baku this November will be yet another opportunity for the global leaders to make meaningful commitments. But will this be the moment when the words are finally turned into action? Or will we once again see promises with very little follow through? However, there is hope. The 2024 United Science Report outlines how advances in technology and renewable energy offer a path forward. But to turn the tide, we must dramatically scale up these efforts. It's not just about reducing emissions, it's about rethinking our relationship with the planet, creating resilient communities, and ensuring that future generations inherit a world worth living in. It also means that we need to relook at how policies are formed and question the integrity of those who elect themselves to lead. The choice is clear: continue down the path of inaction and face a future of chaos, or unite in a fight against climate change. Time is running out, but it's not too late yet. But in order for this to occur, we also have to discuss the elephant in the room situations. But before talking about our leaders, I would like to present to you some facts. Climate-related disasters worldwide have significantly increased in 2024, with estimates ranging from 350 to 500 annually over the past 2 decades. A worrying projection is 560 disasters expected by 2030 and an average of 1.5 disasters per day. Climate change has led to a surge in extreme weather events like heat waves, floods, droughts, wildfires, and intense storms, with 2023 being the warmest year on record, thereby increasing the frequency and severity of these disasters. To learn more about the statistics and the ongoing impact of climate change, you can refer to the detailed reports from the World Meteorological Organization and the World Wildlife Fund. Now, let's understand a bit about what our elected leaders are truly up to. The first climate conference of the parties, COP1, took place all the way back in 1995 in Berlin, Germany, as part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Adoption in 1992 and enacted in 1994. The annual COP meetings continue to address global climate issues. So 28 years later, COP28 was held in Dubai from November to December 23. It was the largest UN climate conference to date. It aimed to implement a Paris Agreement to promote global efforts to transition away from fossil fuels and focus on climate resilience, renewable energy, and the COP28 UAE Declaration on Climate and Health, focus on sustainable, equitable health systems. And guess what the key takeaway was? Apart from the usual rhetoric of the terms of global stocktake and climate biodiversity linked to high emission industries and health and climate, they sprung a surprise. Yes, at COP28, there was a groundbreaking moment when humanity finally declared to whisper the forbidden Harry Potter-like words, fossil fuels. Decades have been lost since the leaders were politely skirting around the elephant in the room. President Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber highlighted that this was the first instance where the term fossil fuels was explicitly included in the final agreement of this nature. And what a travesty! With a roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels, leaders patted themselves on the back for this historic breakthrough as an acknowledging a burning violation, a burning building that is already half collapsed and is worthy of applause. It's almost as if they were proud for discovering fire, except this time they realize it's been burning down the house all along. But hey, better late than never, right? I urge everyone to understand this topic well, as it's a matter of life and death for all of us. Do not believe that elected leaders will act without pressure. Having said that, I understand that most of us cannot protest in the streets all the time. But there is something that people can do. The local authorities can be compelled to take necessary actions. Ideally, these officials should take a strong stance and urge the political leadership of the country, since the buck stops there. The necessary action should champion the welfare of its citizens, which include the business community. A good way to create change is by raising awareness among citizens with facts and figures. Believe it or not, there are people who still do not trust climate scientists, and I wonder if they would seek help from the quack rather than a qualified doctor when they fall ill. You know what I mean by that? If you're not aware that people who believe that the earth is not flat, well, are we to conclude that climate, Earth's rotation, the sun's movement, the moon's cycle, and other planets should fulfill their roles according to natural laws rather than according to the preferences of a select group of individuals? As responsible global citizens, we have to stay united and make the planet a better place for future generations, not just to survive, but to thrive. And as we face the realities of climate change, let's commit to taking care of ourselves and each other. Staying informed and prepared is the best way to ensure our safety in a changing world. Until next time, I bid you farewell.
You cannot survive without the planet. When the planet thrives, we do too.